everybody loves a good superhero. The one thing that some people love even more is a really great villain. And what happens when you get a good hero and a great villain and you put them together and the drama that occurs. I feel like that's at the heart of superhero comics at the very least.
Mm.
And obviously antagonist, protagonist storytelling in general. But where it gets so juicy in comics is that there are years and years of history and build up between two characters so that when you get a book like the recent Sabretooth War, where Sabretooth, I won't spoil it, but he leaves Wolverine the worst kind of birthday gift that any father could imagine. It means that much more. Sure, you could do something like that in an image book. You could have that happen in issue 5, right? But you don't have the buildup of 40 years of history between two characters to pull from. And that's what makes it so juicy to me. So I wanted to talk to you guys about your favorite like superhero, supervillain rivalries, clashes, and what makes it so special to you.
It's interesting. Do they have to be superhero, supervillain? Because
Uh, Go ahead.
you mentioned the decades long history and that mostly this stuff happens in superhero books. But the first thing I thought of when you said that was Rick Grimes and uh
Governor?
uh no,
Shane?
early on. Is it Shane?
Oh,
Yeah.
Shane. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um and the way that turn happens,
Yeah.
um I don't exactly remember how it happens in the book, but in the show, Rick has been gone and then he shows up and Shane's been trying to get with his wife or whatever, and like you can see where they're both coming from, but that turn happens and Rick is like, look man, I gotta kill you. Like,
Yeah.
and it was like, but it was such a great use of history and motivations, coming together and clashing.
Yeah. I love stuff like that, man. Then
Yeah,
that's a great example. I love so with a lot of times with superhero comics, you get a baked in villain. Like you don't really get to see the turn or see the
yeah,
becoming so much. And Shane ultimately does become an early antagonist for Rick in The Walking Dead, but you actually get to see it unfold, which you're right, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
mm,
And it's funny you bring up that because I was just curious. Shane gets killed issue 6.
yeah,
Like, like
yeah.
it's that
I knew it.
exactly what Sean mentioned. That quick thing. Um,
Yeah.
for me, the rivalries that I really like are those on site ones. Like Wolverine Sabretooth on site.
Yeah.
Um, but the one that I always jump to is Spider Man Green Goblin. There's always, or I guess Spider Man Norman Osborn is a better way of saying it, but there's always uneasiness. I mean, outside of the current run of Spider Man, um, there's always that like uneasiness from Norman being Peter Parker's pseudo father figure for a time, and then causing him the most severe pain in his life, emotional pain with Gwen Stacy. And there's that one. I think it's a series of just 2 panels. It's Giuseppe Camuncoli and Dan Slott on Superior Spider-Man, um, where Peter finally comes back, and Green Goblin's running amok. He's doing all these things. Doc Ock couldn't really handle that correctly.
Mm,
Um,
mm, 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 mm,
and
mm.
then when Peter's back, he makes a joke to Green Goblin, and then
It's
Green Goblin
about
just stops
carrying a man
everything.
purse. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Green
yeah,
Goblin
yeah, yeah,
stops everything and just looks at him and says, "It's you."
yeah,
And then Peter's like, "I'm back." That was just that's just so good in terms of a
yeah.
rivalry, because I think even in the current status quo in the year of our Lord 2024, where Zeb Wells' Spider-Man is still happening, um, even though they're not antagonistic, there is a bit of a rivalry between Peter and Norman. There's uneasiness in terms of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think most recently, Peter got Norman Osborn sins in him that caused him to go crazy and almost kill his ex girlfriend's current boyfriend. Good old the Rizzler Paul. So there's always stuff going on between them that causes issues, whether or not it's directly affected one another. And that just Green Goblin Spider Man is just like that dynamic for me.
Yeah, and especially because that dynamic has had real consequence to Peter. Like we know about the losses that he's taken that are actually losses. Like, let's talk about Superman and Lex. Like, what losses has Superman taken to Lex?
Yeah.
You know, um, the Joker got Batman for Jason Todd, but he's back. So
Yeah, the Lex and Superman is so interesting because like really Lex doesn't do that much, you know?
It's always about the perception of Superman rather than actual physical things that happen.
Yeah. And I guess, that's clever and that's certainly more impactful. But I was recently reminded of the Superman and Doomsday fight. And it's not a rivalry per se, in that, Doomsday's like a mostly a one-time villain. But having someone truly match Superman to the point where they kill each other at the same time with like matching blows. Like, what's Lex gonna do to that? Like, you know,
yeah.
But one of the things I do like about Superman and Lex's relationship, as it being just typically hero versus villain, but the fact that like in another world they could be good friends.
mm,
Like there is commonality there. I mean, some of the history they were friends growing up. Um, that's changed throughout crises or whatever. But it's that always like if Lex could just be a good guy, they would work so well together. Um, and it's just knowing that it's not quite there. It's always been close to being there. There was that time when Lex had the Superman. He was Superman for a bit, and kind of filling that void. I think because Superman was just being a dad at that point. I forget the exact circumstances around it, but like just the ones where it's like if you just twist it a little bit, these two could be beneficial to each other.
Yeah, I think for me the problem with that dynamic is that there are no stakes. It feels like there are no stakes. It
mm,
just feels like Superman isn't threatened by Lex. And that's weird to me because all the other like primary antagonists are a threat. Like Green Goblin is a threat to Peter, and he's proven that through his behavior, which has cost Peter things that he can't get back. Whereas I can't think of a time when Superman has suffered a lot. I mean, like Cale said, like Doomsday killed him, not that I don't like Lex as a character. Just I don't know. I've never cared too much about that dynamic. One that I love is actually Black Panther and Namor.
yeah.
It's another one of those on-site ones.
What Jonathan Hickman did with those two characters during his time on Avengers and New Avengers um was just masterful.
Mm,
Truly incredible because these are two characters who actually have a lot in common. They're
mm,
tremendously similar. They're both royalty. They're both, they're kings. They have the weight of their kingdoms on their shoulders. Um, they are both the physical representation of their nation's strength. T'Challa, where he is the Black Panther. He's the front line. They have the Dora Milaje and all that, but the Black Panther is their arm. And same for Namor. So I always loved it. As much as they're similar, it's almost like you meet yourself and you actually hate yourself. Like, oh my God, I suck. I'm so annoying. Um, they have that sort of thing. But there's a underneath all of that, there is a certain level of respect because they know what the other endures. They
mm.
hate each other. and they're willing to do anything to get at each other, but they do sort of see who each other is. There's a respect of the title. I mean, in Black Panther, during Ta-Nehisi Coates' run, I actually no, not even. It was in the Avengers where
Yeah.
Wakanda gets flooded.
Yeah. Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
And then in Avengers afterwards, like T'Challa has no issues invading Atlantis.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh God.
Which
I love that
it's weird to think that there's somebody out there who hates Namor more than Reed Richards does, but it's it's T'Challa.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Another one I like. I mean, there's also like the classic Doctor Doom, Reed Richards.
Yeah.
You know, that's another one where I feel like it's like they're so close to being helpful to each other that they just can't get past it, and always, you know, Doom's ego always gets in the way, or Reed's ego. They're both screwed up by ego in ways that really makes for some juicy drama in comics.
Yeah. And again, you go back to Hickman, he really
Mm-hmm.
put a stamp on that relationship dynamic.
I think he made Doom like a Marvel villain in a way, more so when he started handling Fantastic Four and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I go ahead, Cale.
Well, I was gonna go to the next one.
Yeah.
One I think is less talked about these days, I think, is the Flash and his rogues. Because it's not just one rogue that I think the Flash has a rivalry with. It's all of them. You know, because in the beginning, you know, they all sort of work together and they would twirl their mustaches and haha, they get beat by the Flash. But then at a certain point, they figured out, no. If we work together, this guy's ours.
Yeah.
And they do it and it works. And it's always with a respect of, you know, we're not looking to hurt people. We're just trying to make our lives better. And creators have done such a good job of humanizing the rogues. You know, Captain Cold and Heatwave and you know, so many others. Um, they've done such a good job of humanizing those characters that, you know, when the Flash comes to stop them, you almost don't want him to.
Hmm.
And what I like about that dynamic too is like they represent something the Flash can't fix or hasn't figured out a way to fix.
Yeah.
They're victims of circumstance, really.
Yeah.
You know, they come from poverty. They just have situations where, like, you know, they have sick relatives or something where it is such a, it's not something the Flash can just run around or punch or make a tornado around to solve. He can't, and it's almost like a reflection of the Flash's failures as a superhero, that he can't fix those, and this is the personification of that.
And I think it works so much better than the Reverse Flash.
That guy's
Because
just
it's
on site twirly mustache guy. Yeah.
yeah, it's like that's who DC wants you to think is the good, cool villain. But it's just like it's trying to. Sometimes it feels like it's trying to make fetch happen.
Hmm.
You know, in
Trying
the
trying to make
'70s or
Flash
whatever.
happen.
What?
Trying to make Flash happen, as it were.
Oh, good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
In the '70s or '80s, um, the Reverse Flash killed Iris, and that like sent Barry over the edge. Um, and that was like dope. And there was a big, you know, the trial of Barry Allen was a massive storyline. Um, and then he kind of like, you know, disappeared before disappearing was cool. And then you had like the rogue stories, and then, you know, the crisis stuff happened, and then we got into the Wally stuff. But since then, like the Reverse Flash characters have just been obsessed. Just Joker light, Joker yellow.
And it doesn't help that Professor Zoom is almost identical, but a different character.
with the same goal.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's some confusion that I always had with the Flash. That's why when the Rogue showed up, I was excited. When Grodd showed up, I was excited.
Yeah,
Rod's awesome.
get a monkey in the book. Like, come on.
Simple but effective.
I think for me, the ultimate is always going to be Professor Xavier and Magneto because of the sadness of it. Um, the fact that they actually were friends, and what sets them apart is ideology. Ultimately, it's like if you were to have a best friend, right? Someone you really love and care about, and as you get older, you know, you're a Democrat and they're a Republican, and you just can't get over it. Like it just that's always a wedge in between you. You love that person. You know, you could sit like the classic scene in at the end of X-Men by Bryan Singer, um, when they play chess together while Magneto is in
Yeah.
prison.
Yep.
You know, they could sit together, they could have that moment, but outside of those walls, outside of that, they can't be together. They cannot be friends
And
because
even
ideologically, it's just
and even within that, like, it's tense.
yeah,
Yeah.
And then seeing how those ideologies then permeate through the generations of X-Men too, like turning Cyclops and Wolverine into a similar situation. I always thought that was a great thing. Um, One thing in this discussion though I'm realizing is none of us are bringing up Batman Joker. Are we Batman and Jokered out?
I just don't think it's. I just don't. I've never really thought it was that cool.
Interesting.
Like it's okay, yeah, like I like the Joker. I'm the furthest thing from anti-Joker. I don't have Joker fatigue necessarily. I when a story is good, I'm always going to be receptive to that. It's just that I think Batman has other villains who are more interesting. I have always been a Harvey Dent fan. That's my number one Batman villain. So to me, the Joker is a force of nature. That's great, but what do I care about that? I don't actually think they have a relationship. I don't know why people
Mm.
get into that whole thing. Like just because people say it, it becomes true. But like Batman's not interested in a relationship with the Joker. He's not interested in having a dynamic with the Joker. He just can't beat this guy because he's not allowed to kill. That's it. And the
Mm.
Joker's nuts, and he fucks with Batman because he wants to. I don't know.
I also I also think that with a rivalry, you sort of have to be on the same page at some level. There's some form where you have to be equal. And Batman and the Joker are just not. In the example of like um Xavier and Magneto, like, these guys could be great friends and they do share a common goal, the prosperity of mutants. It's just that Magneto is the prosperity of mutants over humans.
Right.
Batman and Joker don't share sort of equal footing. Other than they're almost the best in their fields in opposite directions. Batman is this uh, arbiter of like order and um the world's greatest detective, blah blah blah. But Joker is pure chaos. They like For me, a better example of a rival for Batman would be something like Ra's al Ghul.
And also there's emotion there. There's something to that. Like Ra's al Ghul wants Bruce to be his son. Like that's a flip on the dynamic. Normally it's like there's a lack of respect or whatever. This is I respect you so much, I want you to work with me. And Bruce
Yeah.
is like, no, because you're crazy. But they have similar skill sets, and Ra's is like the leader of this incredible organization that you could see Batman, if Batman were a different type of person, you could see him being that, he could see him in that position. Um, and I guess the idea is supposed to be that if Batman were a little crazier, he'd be the Joker. Like, but I've never felt that either.
One bad day turns into
Right.
the Batman who laughs.
Yeah. I'm not compelled by that. Ultimately, I think because of the fact that those two cannot have a connection emotionally, it can't evoke anything. That's how I feel. Like, yes, they can have great interactions, but if you'll notice, in The Dark Knight, the emotional core of the movie has nothing to do with the Joker. It has to do with Bruce and, well, Batman and Two-Face, Bruce and Harvey, not the Joker.
The
It
Joker
never can be.
Yeah, the Joker is what brings Harvey there.
Right.
So the only thing I sometimes like to view them in like they can't exist without the other sort of situations. I know that's what some writers have taken that route, and I like when that's explored. But for me, it's just like which is Joker Year One just happened right now. It's like explaining a little too much for me. I think it's just oversaturated in my opinion. I rather read a Hank Pym Ultron story again than more Joker Batman. It's too much.
Hello?
You're there.
That
You're
was
there.
crazy. I got an error message. I don't know if you guys got that.
No, you're good.
We're still here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that was my take on Batman Joker.
I wanted to ask you a question, Ty.
Yeah.
What Okay, when you say that one can't exist without the other, do you think that I guess I get it on the Joker end of things, but do you think that if the Joker managed, like someone killed him, he died, mysteriously, or just whatever happens, that Batman would cease to function or exist?
I think in its current state, yeah. I think that that form of chaos is the only thing that keeps Batman going and going and going. I think in a way that the Joker would continue on without the Joker. That element of chaos would be there. I just think Joker is personification of that. It's the whole, would Gotham be the same way it is if Batman didn't exist? Possibly not. It was just mob crime before. And Batman shows up and it's circus freaks and clay people and giant lizards, So I think that you can't really have one without the other. And I think that doesn't necessarily mean like you can't have Batman without Joker. I think like it could be the Bat family can't, needs to exist in some way if Batman's not around. But I do think that they're so extreme, they're so controlling of who they are, or Batman's a pure agent of order, as Cale said, and Joker's an agent of chaos, that they are intrinsically linked in an almost like a cosmic way. And I think that's when it gets interesting when we talk about that for Batman and Joker. I think it gets boring when it's like very text based, I guess. It's like, oh, there's a bad guy, good guy. I like when it gets into like, can they exist without each other? I think sometimes it goes a little too far, and then people are like, they're in love, But that's where it's the most compelling for me.
Okay. So what happens when Batman thinks Joker's dead?
I think it's possible he just either he retires. I think that's one of the things like Tom King brought up, in his run. Like, can Batman just retire? And no, he can't, because there's stuff always out there, And I think Joker is the personification of that. Whether or not the Joker exists, who knows? But I think it's that the Joker as an almost entity will always exist, and therefore Batman needs to exist. Could that be a robot that has his consciousness in it? Apparently, he's thought of that. So,
All right. Well,
I feel
those are our thoughts on the greatest rivalries that we could come up with in comics, our favorites. What are yours? Let us know. Reach out, leave us a comment, let us know your thoughts on that. And do you think that Batman and the Joker need each other to exist? Do you think that they can't exist without one another? Sound off in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.